A chance encounter on a crowded street changes a billionaire's son forever, and the woman who had nothing finds a life she never dreamed possible. The billionaire was not a man who often walked among the common crowd. His life was filled with meetings, luxury, and schedules carefully planned by assistants. But today was different. He had decided to take his young son out for a walk in the city. The boy, fragile in health and shy by nature, did not usually leave the safety of home. His world was small, made up mostly of his father, caretakers, and the walls of his large house. The father thought maybe seeing the outside world, hearing noises, and watching people might help the child feel stronger. But deep inside, he also carried a hidden fear. He did not know how his son would handle it. The city was busy that afternoon. Cars honked, vendors called out, and footsteps echoed on the pavement. The boy sat in his wheelchair, holding tightly to the armrest. His eyes darted left and right as if every sound was too loud, every movement too fast. The father bent down and whispered softly, trying to comfort him. "It's all right, son, I'm here." But the child's small hands trembled. His lips quivered, and suddenly he broke down. Tears rolled down his cheeks, and he began to cry uncontrollably. The father's heart ached. He was a man who controlled empires, who commanded thousands of employees, who made deals that moved markets. Yet here, in the middle of the street, he felt powerless. He held his son's shoulders, trying to soothe him. He whispered. He promised ice cream, he promised toys, but nothing worked. The child's cries grew louder, his face turning red with distress. People began to glance at them, some with pity, some with annoyance, but most just kept walking. The billionaire's chest tightened. He had always believed money could solve any problem. Doctors, therapists, private tutors, he had hired them all for his son. But right now, surrounded by strangers, all his wealth felt useless. He felt eyes burning into his back. He hated looking vulnerable, especially in front of others. His jaw clenched, frustration mixing with helplessness. He knelt down and tried again. "Please, son, calm down." But the boy only screamed louder, his little fists shaking in fear. Then, through the blur of the crowd, a figure stepped forward. She was not dressed in clean clothes. Her coat was torn, her shoes worn out. Her hair looked messy, and her face was tired, but her eyes were warm. A homeless woman. She walked slowly, carefully, as if she didn't want to scare the child. The father stiffened. His first instinct was to push her away. He was used to people approaching him for money, for favors. But before he could speak, the woman crouched down near the boy, keeping a respectful distance. Her voice was soft, almost like a lullaby. "Hey there, little one," she said gently. The boy's cries hiccuped, his tear-filled eyes turning toward her. She didn't try to touch him. She didn't force a smile. Instead, she spoke as if she had all the time in the world. "You know what I see?" "I see the bravest boy in this whole street. Do you know why?" "Because you came out here today." "That's not easy, is it?" The child blinked, his sobs slowing just a little. The woman tilted her head and added, "I used to know a boy who got scared of loud sounds, too. You know what he did? He covered his ears and made funny faces until the scary noises went away." She demonstrated, puffing her cheeks and crossing her eyes. For the first time in that long, difficult moment, the boy gave a small, shaky giggle. The father froze, stunned. He had tried everything, logic, promises, comfort, but nothing worked. Yet this stranger, this woman with nothing, had reached his son within seconds. She continued softly, almost whispering now. "It's okay to be scared. Everyone gets scared sometimes. But you're not alone. Your dad is here, and look, I'm here too. We're not going to let anything hurt you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small piece of folded paper. It looked old, maybe something she had kept for a long time. With a few swift movements, she turned it into a little paper bird. She placed it gently on the boy's lap. "See, this bird is brave too, and it wants to be your friend." The boy stared at the paper bird, then at the woman. His breathing slowed and his tears stopped. He touched the bird with careful fingers. Then, almost unbelievably, he smiled. A real smile, small but shining through his face like sunlight after rain. The billionaire felt his throat tighten. That smile was something he hadn't seen in weeks, maybe months. He looked at the homeless woman, unsure of what to say. Gratitude? Confusion? He only stood there, speechless, as his son leaned slightly forward, his eyes fixed on the woman who had calmed him when no one else could. The world around them seemed to fade. The noise of the city, the rushing footsteps, the honking cars, all of it blurred into the background. For that one moment, it was just the boy, the woman, and the father watching silently. The woman didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for thanks. She only smiled softly at the boy and said, "You're stronger than you think. Don't forget that." Then she stood, dusting off her torn coat, ready to slip back into the crowd. The father's heart pounded. Something about her words, her calmness, her kindness, it struck him deeply. He had met world leaders, scientists, and billionaires, yet no one had ever touched his soul the way this woman just had. He wanted to stop her, to ask who she was, but his lips wouldn't move. He only watched as she began to walk away. His son tugged at his sleeve, still holding the paper bird. The boy's eyes, brighter now, followed the woman. For the first time that day, the father realized this encounter was not an accident. It was something else, something that would change his life forever. The father stood frozen, still holding the handles of his son's wheelchair, his mind racing. He had just watched something he could not fully understand. A stranger, a woman who clearly lived on the streets, had done in minutes what he had tried for years. She had calmed his boy, reached into his frightened little world, and pulled out a smile. It unsettled him. He was a man who solved problems with money, power, or influence. But here in the middle of the city, none of those mattered. A homeless woman with nothing had succeeded where he had failed. The boy, meanwhile, was still clutching the little paper bird she had folded. His small fingers stroked the fragile wings again and again, as if the paper creature had given him courage. His breathing was calm now, and the tears had dried on his cheeks. Every few seconds he looked up at his father with an almost shy pride, as though saying, "See, I'm brave now." The father's chest tightened at the sight. He longed to pick up his son and hold him, to tell him how proud he was. But he was also distracted. His eyes kept searching the crowd for the woman. She hadn't gone far. She was sitting on the edge of the pavement, her back against a wall, her head lowered. A paper cup sat in front of her, almost empty. People walked past, not sparing her a glance, as if she were invisible. But to the father, she was not invisible at all. She was a mystery, a puzzle that demanded an answer. How had she known what to say? How did she know how to reach a child like his? He hesitated for a long time. Pride held him back. All his life he had built walls around himself, walls of wealth, status, and distance. Talking to strangers was something he avoided, especially those from the streets. But when he looked at his son, still holding the bird and smiling faintly, something inside him shifted. He knew he could not just walk away. With a deep breath, he guided the wheelchair toward her. She noticed them coming, and her body tensed slightly, as if preparing for harsh words. She had probably faced enough insults and cold stares to expect nothing different. But instead of anger, the man knelt down to her level. His son looked at her eagerly, as though she were already a friend. "You helped my boy," the father said quietly. His voice was rough, unsure, like a man stepping into unknown territory. "Thank you." The woman's tired eyes lifted to meet his. For a moment there was silence. Then she gave a small nod. "Children shouldn't have to carry fear alone," she answered softly. Her words were simple, but they pierced straight through him. He felt something stir inside, an ache he had buried for years. How did you know what to say?" he asked, almost in a whisper. The woman's gaze dropped to the pavement. "I didn't know," she admitted. "I just remembered what I used to say to my own child when he was scared." The father's breath caught. He hadn't expected that. "You have a child?" he asked. Her lips curved into the faintest of smiles, but her eyes glistened. "Had," she corrected softly. "He's not with me anymore." The air between them grew heavy. The father didn't know what to say. He wanted to ask more, to understand, but something about the sadness in her voice warned him not to push too far. His son, innocent and unaware of the pain behind her words, leaned forward and held up the paper bird. "Look," the boy said with a shy grin. "It's flying." He moved it gently through the air. The woman's face softened. She reached out but stopped halfway, unsure if she should touch the boy. When the child offered the bird back to her, she shook her head. "No, sweetheart. That's yours now. You keep it safe." The father studied her carefully. Her clothes were ragged, her hands rough from hardship, and yet in that moment she looked like the richest person in the world to his son. The boy's trust, his laughter, his sudden calmness, all of it had come from her presence. The father felt humbled, and it unsettled him more than he could admit. People still walked past them, some slowing down to glance, others frowning at the strange scene of a billionaire, crouched on the sidewalk beside a homeless woman. The father didn't care. For once, he wasn't thinking about appearances. He was thinking about the way his son's smile had returned, about the way this woman had spoken as if she understood his pain better than anyone else. "Why did you stop?" the father asked finally. Most people just kept walking. She looked at him as if the question didn't even need an answer. "Because he was crying," she said simply. "That's reason enough." Her words landed like a stone in his chest. He had lived in a world where every action was tied to profit, gain, or strategy. Yet here was a woman who had nothing. No wealth, no safety, not even a home. And still she had chosen to stop, to comfort a child that wasn't hers. She had given kindness freely with no expectation of reward. The boy tugged his father's sleeve. "Dad," he whispered, "she's nice. Can she come with us?" The father's throat tightened. He didn't know how to respond. He wanted to say yes, to offer her safety, food, comfort, but he hesitated. Something in her eyes told him she wasn't used to being helped. She looked like someone who had been disappointed too many times before. Offering her something too quickly might feel like pity, and he sensed she would not accept that. So instead, he simply said, "Maybe one day, son." Then he turned back to the woman. "What's your name?" She hesitated before answering. "Anna. Anna," he repeated as if testing the sound of it. "I won't forget that." She gave him a small smile, almost uncertain, as though kindness directed at her felt foreign. Then with a quiet nod, she stood and slowly walked back toward her corner. The father watched her go, feeling something strange in his chest, a mix of gratitude, sadness, and curiosity. When he looked down at his boy, he found the child still smiling, still holding the little paper bird tightly. For the first time in a long while, the boy seemed lighter, freer, as if a weight had been lifted off his small shoulders. As they moved away, the father couldn't stop glancing back at the spot where Anna sat. Something told him this wasn't the end. Something told him their lives had just crossed for a reason, and that reason was only beginning to reveal itself. And deep inside, he knew one thing for certain. The woman who had nothing had just given him everything: hope for his son, and a reminder that compassion was worth more than all the money he owned. The billionaire could not get Anna out of his mind. That night when he returned home, the city lights outside his window seemed dimmer than usual. His mansion was quiet, filled with expensive furniture, golden frames, and sparkling chandeliers, but he felt a strange emptiness inside it. His son was asleep upstairs, the little paper bird resting on the bedside table like a treasure. The boy had insisted on keeping it close, and before drifting to sleep he had whispered, "Dad, she made me happy." Those words echoed in the father's mind long after the house had gone still. He sat alone in his study, staring at the fire burning in the fireplace. His world had always been built on control. If he wanted answers, he got them. If he wanted people, they came. If he wanted things, he bought them. But this time it wasn't money or power he needed, it was truth. Who was Anna? Why did her words carry such weight? How could a woman who had nothing show so much strength, so much love to a child she had never met? The next morning he made a decision. He called one of his trusted aides, a man who usually handled delicate matters for him. "Find out everything about her," he said firmly. "The woman's name is Anna. She was on 5th Street yesterday near the old bakery. She has no home, but I want to know her story. Every detail." The aide hesitated. "Sir, may I ask why?" The billionaire's jaw tightened. He wasn't ready to admit that he felt indebted to her, or that he wanted to understand her. So instead he said, "Because she helped my son, and I want to know who she really is." Hours turned into days, and soon the pieces of Anna's life began to emerge. The aide brought him files, old records, and stories from people who remembered her. What he discovered left him shaken. Anna had once lived a very different life. Years ago, she had been a mother, raising a little boy of her own. She had worked as a cashier in a small grocery store, barely making enough to survive, but always finding ways to smile for her son. Neighbors remembered her walking him to school, holding his hand tightly, humming songs to keep him cheerful. She had no husband by then. He had abandoned them when their boy was still very young. But Anna never complained. She carried her burden alone with quiet strength. Then tragedy struck. Her son became sick, an illness that needed costly treatment, the kind of treatment she could never afford. She worked extra hours, sold her belongings, even skipped meals to save money. She begged for help, but little by little the sickness grew worse. In the end, she lost him. Her boy, her only reason for waking up every morning, was gone. After that, her life crumbled. She had no family to lean on, no savings to keep her steady. Grief consumed her, and soon she lost her job, her apartment, and everything she had built. One by one, the pieces of her life slipped through her fingers until she had nothing left. That's how she ended up on the streets. Yet even there, in the harshest corners of the city, she was remembered for her gentleness. Other homeless people spoke of how Anna often gave away part of her meal if someone else was hungrier. She never turned away from a child, even if all she could offer was a smile. The billionaire sat in silence as he listened to the reports. His aide spoke the facts, but the father heard more than just facts. He heard echoes of pain, strength, and a love that refused to die even after tragedy. He felt his chest tighten as he imagined her holding her own sick child, whispering words of comfort the same way she had whispered to his son. That was why she knew exactly what to say. That was why her touch carried so much power. She had walked through the darkest grief a mother could face, and yet she still carried love in her heart. For a long time, the billionaire didn't speak. His aide waited quietly, unsure if he had done something wrong. Finally, the father said, "She lost everything, and still, she gave my son something I could not." His voice cracked slightly, and he turned away, staring out the tall window at the city skyline. Memories of his own life flashed in his mind. He had lost his wife years ago, leaving him to raise his son alone. But unlike Anna, he had buried himself in work, in money, and building an empire so strong no one could hurt him again. He had built walls so high that even his son sometimes struggled to climb over them. He realized now how cold he had become, how distant. He had believed wealth would protect his son from pain, but he had forgotten that love, patience, and simple kindness mattered more than anything else. That night, he visited his son's room. The boy was awake, sitting up in bed with the little paper bird in his hands. "Dad," the boy whispered, "do you think we'll see her again?" The father sat on the edge of the bed, brushing the boy's hair back gently. He wanted to promise yes, but he wasn't sure if Anna would even allow herself to be found again. "I don't know, son," he said honestly. "But if we do, we'll thank her properly." The boy smiled sleepily, hugging the bird close. "She's nice," he murmured before closing his eyes. The father sat there for a while, watching his son drift into sleep. He thought of Anna again, sitting alone on the street, her back against a cold wall with nothing but a paper cup and memories of a child she had lost. His chest ached with an emotion he rarely felt, compassion. For the first time, he saw beyond the surface of the world he lived in. Not everyone was lazy or undeserving as he had once believed. Some people had lost battles no one else could see. As he rose and left the room, one thought burned in his mind. He could not let Anna remain in the shadows. She had carried kindness into his son's world when no one else had cared. Now it was his turn. He didn't know how, but he was determined to bring light back into her life, the way she had brought it into his. And though he didn't realize it fully yet, his search for Anna was not just about helping her, it was about saving himself too. The billionaire spent the next few days restless. Even though his meetings filled the calendar and his assistants moved around him with files and figures, his thoughts kept drifting back to Anna. He remembered her voice, her calmness, and the way his son's face had lit up because of her. He had all the luxuries money could buy, but he knew that no amount of gold or silver could match what she had given in that moment. It wasn't just about comforting his child. It was about touching his soul. He could not let it end as a passing street encounter. Something inside him told him that he owed her more than words. On the third evening after their meeting, he instructed his driver to take him back to that same street where Anna had been sitting. The car rolled past the bakery and the crowded pavement. He searched the corners with sharp eyes until finally he saw her. She was sitting on a piece of cardboard near a wall, her coat wrapped tightly around her shoulders as the cold wind blew. People walked past without looking, but to him, she stood out as though a light was shining only on her. He stepped out of the car, ignoring the curious stares of people who recognized him. He was a billionaire, after all, and not the kind of man who usually crouched on sidewalks. But tonight he didn't care what the world thought. He walked straight to her, and when she looked up, her eyes widened in surprise. "You came back," she said quietly, as if she had not expected to ever see him again. "Yes," he replied, his voice steady but carrying a weight she could feel. "I came because I owe you something I cannot repay with just words." Anna shifted uneasily, pulling her coat tighter. You don't owe me anything. I only helped your son because he needed someone. Her humility pierced him even more. She was not pretending, not trying to gain from him, not expecting money. She truly believed her kindness required no return, and that was exactly why he could not let her remain here on the street. Would you have coffee with me? He asked suddenly. Her eyes widened again. Coffee with you? She laughed lightly, almost bitterly. Do you know how people look at me when I walk into a shop? They think I don't belong there. They think I'll beg or steal. He leaned closer, his voice firm. Let them think whatever they want. If anyone dares say something, they'll answer to me. Please, Anna, come. She hesitated, torn between suspicion and curiosity. But then she saw his eyes, earnest, almost pleading. Finally, she nodded. He guided her to his car where the driver opened the door. People around them whispered. Some even took photos, but he ignored it all. Inside the warm car, Anna sat stiffly, glancing at the leather seats as though she was afraid she might stain them. Relax, he said gently. You belong here as much as I do. They drove to a quiet cafe on the edge of the city, one he often visited when he needed peace. The staff nearly froze when they saw their wealthy guest walk in with a homeless woman. But at his sharp look, they said nothing and led them to a private corner. Anna sat down slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she held the menu. I don't even know what to order. Order anything, he said. Order everything if you like. She gave him a faint smile, the first real smile he had seen from her. She ordered a simple cup of tea, nothing more. He too ordered the same, wanting her to feel comfortable. For a while they sat in silence, sipping the hot tea. Finally he spoke. I know about your past, Anna. I know about your son. Her eyes darkened and the cup shook in her hands. Who told you? She asked, her voice low. I asked, he admitted. I needed to understand the woman who gave my son something priceless. Her lips pressed together, her shoulders tensed. You shouldn't have dug into my life, she whispered. My past is all I have left, and even that hurts too much. I'm sorry, he said softly. I only wanted to understand why you were able to reach my boy when no one else could. Now I know. You've lived the pain I cannot imagine, and yet even after everything, you chose to comfort a stranger's child. Tears filled her eyes, and she quickly looked away. I didn't do anything extraordinary, I just remembered what it was like to hold a frightened child. I remembered what my son needed from me. For a moment, when your boy looked at me, I saw him. I saw my own little boy again, her voice broke, and I couldn't turn away. His throat tightened as he listened. For years, he had seen suffering from a distance, hidden behind charity checks and foundation reports. But hearing Anna's story from her own lips, raw and trembling, was different. It was real. Anna, he said firmly, I cannot change your past. I cannot bring your child back. But I can change your present. I want to help you. She shook her head instantly. No, I don't want your pity. I've survived this long without anyone's help. This isn't pity, he said, his voice rising with emotion. This is gratitude. You gave my son something no doctor, no therapist, no money could give him. You gave him peace. You gave him joy. That means more to me than anything. Let me do something for you in return. Her tears slipped down her cheeks, but she kept shaking her head. People promise help. People say kind words. But they always leave. They always forget. He leaned across the table, his eyes locked on hers. I won't forget. I promise you, Anna, you reminded me what truly matters. You reminded me how much love can heal. Don't push this away. Let me give you what you deserve. For the first time, her resolve cracked. Her shoulders slumped, and she covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. Years of holding in her pain, of standing strong on the streets, poured out in that moment. The billionaire reached out and gently placed his hand on hers. You are not alone anymore, he whispered. After a long silence, she finally nodded. All right, she whispered back. I'll accept. Not because I believe in promises, but because your son believed in me. I saw it in his eyes. That night, when he drove her back, he did not leave her on the street. Instead, he took her to a small apartment he had already arranged, warm and furnished with the basics. She stepped inside in disbelief, touching the walls as though she were dreaming. Tomorrow, he said, we'll talk about work. I'll find you a place where you can use your heart and your strength. But tonight, rest. Anna turned to him with tears streaming freely. Why me? She asked. Why care so much? He gave her a faint smile. Because you cared when no one else did. And because my son's smile is proof that sometimes strangers aren't strangers at all, they're angels sent at the right moment. Her sobs grew stronger, but this time they were mixed with relief. For the first time in years, she laid her head on a pillow and slept in peace, knowing tomorrow would be different. And as the billionaire drove home that night, he felt something inside him change forever. Helping Anna was not just charity, it was redemption. It was a chance to heal not only her broken life, but his own hidden wounds. The morning sun spilled through the curtains of the small apartment Anna now called her own. For years she had woken up on sidewalks, in alleys, or under thin blankets that never kept away the cold. But now she opened her eyes to a real bed, a roof above her head, and a warm room. For a moment she thought she was dreaming. She sat up slowly, her hands touching the pillow, the blanket, the table beside her. All of it felt strange, almost unreal. She remembered the billionaire's words from the night before. "You are not alone anymore." Those words kept repeating in her mind like a song. She whispered them softly to herself, almost afraid they might disappear if she spoke too loudly. At that same moment, the billionaire sat at his breakfast table, watching his son eat. The boy was happier these days. His smile had returned and he spoke more than before. Most importantly, he no longer looked as afraid when they went outside. The little paper bird never left his side. It sat on his nightstand, his desk, even his pocket when he went out. To him it was more than paper. It was hope. The father noticed the change and he knew exactly who was behind it. Anna had touched his son's life in a way no one else could. He decided it was time for her to start a new life. Not just with a home, but with purpose. Later that day, he visited her apartment. She opened the door nervously, her eyes still tired but brighter than before. "You really came back," she said softly, as if she half expected him to vanish from her life like others had. "I told you," he replied gently. "I don't forget. Today I want to show you something." He drove her across the city, his son in the back seat clutching the paper bird happily. The car stopped in front of a community center, a building he had recently funded to help children with special needs. Laughter and chatter filled the air as children played inside, guided by teachers and volunteers. Anna stared at the building, her heart tightening. "What is this place?" she asked quietly. "It's a place for children like my son," he explained. "Children who need extra care, who need love and patience. I want you to work here, Anna. I believe your heart was made for this." Her eyes filled with tears. "Work? Here? But I'm not trained, I'm not educated like these teachers." He shook his head firmly. "What you have cannot be taught in any school. You have compassion, patience, and strength that comes from real life. That's what these children need most. Will you do it?" She looked at the children through the glass windows. Some were playing with blocks, others were painting with messy hands, and a few sat quietly with their caretakers. She saw fear in their eyes, but also hope. It reminded her of her own son, and of the way she had once held him close. Her throat tightened, but she nodded slowly. "Yes, I'll try." The following weeks became the start of a new chapter. Anna began working at the center, not as a teacher with a degree, but as a helper with a heart full of love. At first, she was nervous, unsure if the children would accept her. But soon she found her rhythm. She knelt beside them when they cried, just as she had knelt beside the billionaire's boy that day on the street. She told them little stories, folded paper birds for them, and listened when they were scared. Bit by bit, the children grew attached to her. They began waiting for her smile every morning, for her soft voice that reminded them they were safe. The billionaire often visited with his son. Every time he walked into the center and saw Anna surrounded by children, laughter filling the room, his chest swelled with pride. His son always ran to her, showing her new drawings or telling her small stories. Anna listened as though every word mattered. The boy bloomed under her care, and for the first time in years he looked like a child free from constant shadows. One evening, after visiting the center, the billionaire drove Anna back to her apartment. The city lights flickered outside the car window, and silence filled the space between them. Finally he spoke. "Anna, you've changed more than just my son's life. You've changed mine too." She turned to him, her brow furrowed. "How?" He smiled faintly, his eyes soft. "For years I thought money could fix everything. But I was wrong. My son didn't need more wealth. He needed love, patience, and someone who understood him. You reminded me that life is about people, not power. You taught me that compassion can heal wounds money can't touch. Because of you, I'm not just a businessman anymore. I'm a father again." Tears welled in Anna's eyes. She covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed. "I only did what felt right. I never imagined it would mean this much." "It means everything," he said simply. From then on, Anna was no longer just a woman he had met on the street. She became a part of their lives. On weekends, she often joined them for meals. Sometimes she cooked, laughing as his son made a mess in the kitchen. Sometimes they went for walks in the park, the boy holding both their hands as if they were his two guardians. The mansion, once cold and silent, began to feel alive with warmth and laughter. But it wasn't just his son who healed. Anna healed too. The more time she spent with the boy, the more she felt the heavy weight of her past lift. She would always carry the memory of her lost child, but instead of only pain, she now carried hope. Every smile she gave to the billionaire's son, every moment she comforted another child at the center, became a way to honor the love she once gave her own boy. One night, after dinner at the mansion, the billionaire walked Anna to the door. "I hope you know," he said quietly, "that this isn't charity. This isn't pity. This is family." Anna looked at him, her eyes glistening. "I never thought I'd have a family again," she whispered. "You do now," he said, his voice steady and full of truth. And so, what began as a chance meeting on a busy street became something far greater. A billionaire who thought he had everything discovered the one thing he was missing: human connection. A homeless woman who thought she had lost everything found a new purpose, a new home and a place where her heart was needed. The boy, once withdrawn and fearful, now laughed freely, held by two people who loved him dearly, and in that laughter was proof that life can change in the most unexpected ways, that even the darkest stories can find light when kindness and compassion are shared. The city continued to rush around them with its noise and chaos. But in the middle of it all, 3 lives had been forever intertwined, and none of them would ever be the same again.